Hi, and thanks for checking out my YouTube channel. This next video I have for you is how to remove and reinstall the fuel pump on a 959 Panigale. I'll also have some other videos on how to remove the gas tank as well as some fairings, so please take some time and check those out also. Thanks again for checking out my channel, and please subscribe. So there's still some fuel left over in this tank, so I'm going to drain that out. I should be able to take this off, which I believe is going to be the fuel pump, and hopefully gain access inside there to drain it easily. If it not, we'll have to come up with a different plan here. Usually these are going to be O-ringed, so we don't have to buy any new gaskets or anything like that when we put it back together. They should be reusable. And the bike's still fairly new, so I'm not too worried about the O-rings being old and flat. I'm trying to be very delicate with this. It's coming out, but it's coming out slowly. So there's an O-ring right down here, so it's an O-ringed, it's going into an O-ring tube right on the bottom of there. There's also a gasket here, so we got to be very careful not to pry against this spot. So if you're going to pry it against these bosses here, like so. Okay, and then that O-ring popped out. And very carefully remove this. Okay, so there's the fuel pump for 2018 959 Panigale. That last thing I was struggling with was these two O-rings right here. It was pretty tight. Again, I just pried against these points here very carefully, making sure we didn't damage this O-ring at all. And it looks like I might have hit it a little bit there, but I think that'll flatten out well once it's bolted up. So everything looks real good there. So anyways, that's a fuel pump. That's pretty easy. And then the pipe, the charge line for the fuel is right here, and that's hard lined inside the tank, so you don't have to worry about that. So it's pretty nice. The fuel pump's by itself, an integrated unit there. So we'll set that over there out of the way. Now I've got a gas can down here, so I'm going to dump the rest of the fuel out of here, and then I'm going to wash this out to try and remove all that fuel residue. and then get to wet sanding on it. When you install something that has O-rings, it's a good idea to use a little bit of silicone grease on the O-ringed part. So this part slides into the gas tank, and it's a pretty tight fit, so we're going to put a little bit of silicone on that. And it doesn't take much silicone, but this is just silicone for like rubber bushings and polyurethane bushings, things like that. So we're just going to put a little bit on there just so it slides in nicely. If you don't put something like this on there, it may damage the O-ring when you slide it in and cause a cut in it or something like that, and then you're going to have a leak and have some major problems after that. So try to get it only on the O-ring itself. So I got a little bit on the top of it here, but that's all you gotta do is just kind of smear it around in the O-ring, and it should be good enough there. We're gonna make sure our surface here is clean. Looks clean, there's no debris on it. You can see where the O-ring sat before, possibly see that. I suppose it might be hard on the camera, but it ran all around that outside edge, so there's a little bit of tape stickiness there from when I taped this area off. That's pretty clean in there. I'm going to clean that a little bit better. So I just grabbed a little bit of lacquer thinner. Okay, now we're ready to install the fuel pump. Again, it's a little bit of a tight fit, so we want to make sure you never damage these sensors that are around here. You have to put it a little bit, push it to one side and then to the other side to walk it in there. And then the last part is to get that O-ringed piece in, and you want to put it in as straight as possible. And just kind of walk it around a little bit, like so, until it gets to fitting fairly flush. It does take a bit of pressure. Okay, so now we have it pretty close to where it's going to be. And now it's time to screw it down. I made sure to save these bolts in their own specific spot so they didn't get mixed up with anything else. From the factory, they do have a little bit of grease on them, so if they look like they're dry, it might be reasonable to put a small amount of grease. It probably doesn't matter which grease because it doesn't go into the gas or anything like that. It's a closed hole, so I'm just going to finger tighten this up, like so. Try to do a pattern like you would on a car tire when you install a wheel. And you don't want to tighten it down at an angle and put that O-ring into a bind. So that's the pattern that I'm using. I just did this one first, then this one, or this one first, then this one, then this one, this one, and I'm going to go down to this hole here. Again, I don't have torque values for these screws. You just got to make sure that they're snug. It's not going to, you just don't want to over torque it, would be the biggest issue. Getting the actual torque value would be the safest route to go, but especially if you're So I got all these bolts snugged up just by hand, kind of like as if you're using a screwdriver. I went ahead and double checked on the torque values for these, and it's 5 Newton meters, which is about 3 to 4 foot-pounds of torque. So it's very, very light. You don't have to put much of a tightening on these. So that's what we're going to do next, just snug them up just lightly. I'm going to use a crisscross type pattern. So to do a crisscross pattern, what I would recommend is starting on the side that has the rubber O-ring that goes into the tubing inside the tank. So I'm just going to snug that up a little bit, hit cross from that, hit this one over here next. Again, you want to tighten it up so it doesn't turn anymore, but without over tightening. And I don't have a torque wrench that goes that low, so that's why I'm doing it this way. If I had one that went down to 3 foot-pounds or 4 foot-pounds, I would torque it, but it's just a pretty small number. You just have to just make them snug. Once I got them all torqued down to a decent amount, I'm just running around and just kind of checking to make sure they're all about equal. And that's just enough to, you can see me lifting the corner of the tank a little bit. That's all I'm putting for torque on it. It's not much. So they're all equal. They're not sliding or moving anymore, spinning anymore. So that's that. So now we're going to go ahead and set it on the bike and start hooking up the hoses and wires.